You're listening to WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 1037 on your dial, and globally at WPVMFM.org.
Bountiful valley, way up high, fertile and green land of the sky. Strip of the Blue Ridge mountain range, lengthy autumns, lingering springs. Upon the parkway, take a drive, float down the French Broad, take a dive, maybe enjoy a local brew. All that and built more too in Asheville.
Well, folks, it's Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for Storyville. I'm your host, Chuck Fink, and today I have a very special guest. You're going to have fun today, folks. I promise you that. My guest today is a friend and a most interesting man. Jeff Stratton got into storytelling accidentally in 2012 while parking cars at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough, Tennessee. Later, someone, I don't know who they are, but they signed up Jeff for Swapping Grounds. It's kind of a karaoke gig in Jonesborough. Jeff created a story. By the way, folks, Jonesborough, Tennessee. I just want to emphasize Tennessee because Jeff created a story making fun of the Tennessee road system and was so well received that he was recruited to become a member of the Jonesborough Storytelling Guild. And he remained a member until he moved to Portugal in 2019. Jeff served as the guild president for 2 years. Prior to retiring to Jonesborough, Tennessee, Jeff was a cop in Tucson for 25 years. Jeff Stratton moved to Jonesborough in 2009, lived there until 2019, where he then moved to, I gotta say this right, Jeff, Obidoxon in Portugal's Costa del Prata, the Silver Coast of Portugal. Here's the important part, folks. I want you to keep this in mind. Jeff is the proud 2000 championship liar at the Haygood Mills, South Carolina Liars Festival, Liars Contest in 2017. He has 4 stories now on YouTube listed under his channel, Jeff M. Stratton, Stratton. Jeff's moniker, and I think I can share this with him, he's the short man with tall tales. Welcome aboard, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. Great talking to you. Great seeing you.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Jeff, and it's just so good to see you. I think I last saw you right before you moved to Portugal. So, speaking of that, you got to share with our audience, what brought you to Portugal from by way of Tucson and Jonesborough?
Vacation, just vacation. My wife and I we were taking about 2 vacations a year to Europe after we retired, and we were trees and we decided in 2018, just 3 short years ago, let's give Portugal a shot. We've been to Spain, Italy, Greece, Germany, Hungary, the rest of them, but we knew very little about it, and we thought we'd take about a 2-week trip and see Portugal. We did. We got on with a tour group called Road Scholar, which is a very educational tour system, and came back very impressed with a small little country, 3/4 the size of Tennessee. And here we are in our late 60s, living in Jonesborough, and looking at each other and saying, do you see us living there? And we had the same thought and had not voiced it. Anyway, got us excited. We started thinking about it, and we thought, maybe the quality of life is such that we would love to live here. Came back again towards the end of that year. Spent 2 more weeks, this time researching, looking at prices of housing and the ease of traffic, and talking to people who are, the grocery stores, everything. And we shucked everything the beginning of 2019, sold a house, sold cars, gave and sold 60 years worth of belongings. We had enough to put on 3 pallets, and I'm talking a pallet like you see in Walmart, okay? Just a basic pallet, some luggage, and 2 rescue greyhounds. And we moved here, bought a house, been here for 2 years, love it.
Okay, before I ask the next question, I just want to let everybody know this is a Zoom chat. So keep in mind, this is Portugal to Asheville, North Carolina. There may be a glitch every now and then. Folks, I promise you will want to stay with this show because Jeff is so interesting. And speaking of a learned man that Jeff is, what did you learn when you moved to Portugal, Jeff?
The cars are smaller. The streets are narrower. A lot of things. Conversion rates, dollars to euros. It's a daily issue. You have to watch that. Learning Portuguese, very different language. It's a tough language. I speak to various degrees, French, Spanish, Greek. I'm forgetting something. French, Spanish, Greek, a little German, now Portuguese, and I'm working on my English. And, yeah. And Portuguese is tough. It's a tough language. It's not Spanish at all. If you think so, you're. Give a quick example. In Spanish, how do you say thank you?
Gracias.
Gracias. In Portugal, obrigado.
Obrigado.
It means like I'm obliged. Obrigado.
Okay. Obrigado.
Say,
Yes.
obrigado.
Yeah, we say Portugal and we had to learn that word. Yes. Obrigado.
In Spanish, if you say I'm going to a class, you say clase or leccione, my lesson, my class. Portuguese, the word is aulas.
Could you repeat that?
It's not even close. A-U-L-A-S, aulas.
Ah.
Pronounced aulas.
And the
So
name
aulas versus class, it's not even close.
what about the name of the town that you live?
Well, we live outside a little town. It's called Obidos. Okay, the Portuguese pronounce it Obidos. It's a 800-year-old castle town. It's actually a castle on the hill. It's still working. They still have businesses in there. It's a little touristy area of sorts. And although the Portuguese don't say Obidos, they go Obich. Everything is shortened, Obich.
Obich.
So when I was telling a friend of mine in the U.S. about moving here, he sent back an email. He said, "How are things in Bitchville?" That's all he heard was the bitch, not the old bitch. It's a different language, and but we're learning it. You know, we practice every chance we can. And first thing you learn is to say, "I don't speak Portuguese very well."
And how does that?
Eu não falo português muito bem.
Oh, you're learning quickly, my friend. I'm impressed.
Well, I got my hair cut today, and I'm at a barber who doesn't speak one word of English. So I have to go and tell him what I want cut, and then we chat about how it's been in the last 3 to 4 weeks for him and me. How do you do that? You sit in the barber chair, and you struggle, and you mistakes, and you do gestures. We're both wearing masks at the same time. And you know what? We work it out. We work it out. I come out laughing. He has a good time. And, you know, it's how you learn. We don't mind making mistakes. And I have made some doozies of mistakes in Portuguese that are laughable, but at the same time, ooh, you know, a pronunciation.
Yeah. It just relates a very quick story of my own. We were in
Sorry on that.
I'm sorry? I think we had a Zoom glitch there.
I was going to tell you a quick story.
Well, could you repeat that? Because we're still.
I was going to tell you.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I want to ask you a different question. I need to ask you because in your bio, we went over from Jonesborough going forward and a little bit about your career, but you've had the most interesting life. I really want our audience to get to know you. Tell us about your early years. It's so unusual.
My early years were spent overseas. Although I was born in DC, my parents immediately moved over to Mexico. We were in Mexico for 2 years, Monterrey, Mexico, and this was in the early 50s. And then followed by 8 years in Greece and then a year in Germany. When I came to the States in '64, I was 11, and my brother and I had finished 6th grade. My brother had finished 5th grade. We didn't speak enough English to go into American school the next year. We were actually held back a year because our English was not that good. So anyway, we grew up in these different countries. Majority of the time was in Greece, and we spoke Greek because we lived there all those years. I was there 8 years, but we went to French Catholic schools. So, and these were with the nuns and the Pope and the whole Latin Mass. I still know the Mass in Latin. In nome Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sancti, Macupa, Mea Maxima Cupa. We had to, that was the rote that you learned back in those days. And if you didn't, you got beaten by a nun with a ruler. So we got to speak, we learned English, a little English at home. some Spanish because we were in Mexico. My brother was born there. Greek in the streets, French in school. And then later I lived on the Mexican border, US-Mexico, Southern Arizona border. And of course, I learned more Spanish there. But we were of different cultures, of different languages. And when we came to the States, we went through a lot of culture, some difficulties, some steep learning. They're not even a curve, just a learning slope. There was no curve to it, straight up. And I mean, everything from, we had never seen television. We had not seen a traffic light. We had not seen American football. Football for us was guys with shorts kicking a round ball and using their head all the time, right? And we just thought that was normal until I was about 17. And I don't know if I had told you this, Chuck, we were living in Maryland. My dad was working for the government all these years, and he was posted back to the DC area. And my 14-year-old sister had snuck out with her boyfriend, much older boyfriend, a boyfriend that was off limits. Apparently, when he was trying to bring her home about 3 a.m, he was trying to get her through the window of the house, and he made noise. And my dad woke up, looked out, saw a car in the dark, and somebody trying to push somebody through a window. So he called the cops. Smart thing to do. But at the same time, he went and got a gun and crouched down behind a window and woke us all up and told us to stay down below the windows. And he did this tactical thing throughout the house. No lights on, doing this. Well, when the cops got there and lit the scene up and guns were out and everybody was down, we realized what had happened. My sister had got caught sneaking back in with her boyfriend, and everything calmed. Well, within the family, things calmed down. It was then that my dad took my brother and me aside, and he said, because we asked him, we didn't know he had a gun. We didn't know he knew how to do these things. My dad was an economist. He was a trained economist, and that's all we knew. He went to his government job and did economic stuff, whatever that is, okay? Boring crap, okay? And only come find out, he took us aside, and he says, the reason I did that, is because I'm a CIA agent. Say what? Well, you know, he has lied to us in the past about other things. Okay, put this in the lying category. And he started showing us some documentation. And he would say, do you remember such and such a scenario in the old country? Do you remember this? Do you remember I took you over here by the Yugoslav border? We met these guys in the woods with uniforms. I was just a little boy. I do remember that. And I always wondered what that was all about. It was inspecting missile sites on the Yugoslav border, which was the Iron Curtain back in those days. And the CIA had put them up and they were inspecting them. So what you do is you bring a family member with you. It looks like you're out for a little vacation or weekend with your kid and you're doing this. So as he went into that, we started realizing that for almost 20 years, we had been kept, what should I say here? Well, been all kept from us. And looking back, it was a smart thing to do. You don't tell an 8-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid so they can go to school and brag. But it blew our minds because we just never imagined this. Never. And by the way, I was just on email with one of my sisters the other day, and I am putting together a kind of a compendium of our memories, the siblings of us, and I'm going to call it A Son of the CIA. And I never worked for them. I was never on any contract with them. But the perspective of somebody who finds out later in life that everything you did in your life, everything your family did was because the CIA told you to. Yeah. It's an interesting perspective. It's kind of going backwards. It's going to be very difficult.
You know, Jeff, there's another part of your life story that I just find so fun to hear every time I hear it. And you got to share this. Growing up in Greece, I understand you had some interesting neighbors and you got into some interesting little kid stuff. Share that with us.
Okay. In Greece, there are two families, well, that are, what should I call them? They're like the political dynasties. One is called Karamanlis, Papandreou. Papandreou, more liberal, Karamanlis, more conservative. And for decades, the families would change. One family would be the prime minister, then the next one, and it would go back and forth. And I got to be good friends with the Papandreous. They live right across the street from us. And their oldest son, George, who's my age, George, his father was the economics minister. And the grandfather they call him Papoose, was the prime minister of the country, the president, the minister of the country. And we knew that, but it was no big deal. Papoose would show up and he would travel in a car and he'd have a couple of guys with suits with him. This is all late 50s, early 60s, to put it in perspective. And they would pull up and they'd go in and visit his son, the economics minister. And then the grandson, George, and I would play. And there were other kids too, but he's the oldest. And one of the things we love to do is to shove a potato up the tailpipe of the prime minister's car. And it wasn't my idea. It wasn't my potato. It wasn't my grandfather. Okay. I was the willing accomplice. Okay. And we get the biggest kick shoving it up there when the bodyguards went inside for a meal or used the bathroom or hang out in the house. And when they came out, they drive up the street and this thing would start chugging and building up pressure and, poof, potato would fly out. Well, one time we packed in, I guess, too hard or too big a potato, and they were going up the street because it's up a little hill, and the thing built up and the car was lurching, and then kaboom, the whole muffler system blew. And pieces of metal and potato are flying. And this is around dusk, and there was a hell of a flash came out of the back of that thing. And the car stopped, the bodyguards jumped out pulling guns, and they're looking around, and immediately the fear that, okay, is this an ambush? What's going on? And the grandfather spotted his grandson, George, and me behind a wall laughing. And so we got into a good bit of trouble for that. And again, I did not know my dad was in the CIA, but from my dad's perspective, and maybe even from the US Embassy's perspective, to have the son of a CIA agent stuffing potatoes and causing damage to the prime minister's car is a big, and my dad told us the connection there until 15 years later, 20 years later, whatever. But yeah, we had some good times. And then George, the son Andreas, who was the economics minister, he later became the prime minister of the country. And then another generation later, George, the grandson, became the prime minister of Greece. He's been out of it now, I'm guessing 6 or 7 years, not quite sure, but he was the head dog. And every once in a while, I look him up on either YouTube or the internet, and he's aged. I, of course, have not, but he is aged. And I show him my wife. She had family pictures with our family and their family. I should have brought one down. They're upstairs in my upstairs. I should have brought one down and showed you the picture of them. But these are the kind of people we grew up with. And we ran the streets and we just did boy stuff, got into some trouble once in a while.
I have to ask you a quick question. Was the prime minister's nickname Mr. Potato Head?
No. They call him Old Man Yorgos, or Yorgos meaning George, or Papoose, which means granddad.
But I'm thinking your friend, the recent prime minister, he could have been called Mr. Potato Head from all of his antics, but I guess he got away with that.
Yeah. I don't know that he would even admit it to this day. I don't know. I tried to contact him a number of years ago, and I did find one of his brothers who's an author. And I told him who we were. And of course, you're talking going back 50 years. And he said, yes, I remember you guys. You were part of the CIA family that lived across from us. So apparently his father had told him later on. And he said, we haven't forgotten when you overthrew our government and threw us out of the country. We were almost executed. We have not forgotten that, because that happened in 1967. The Greek military rose like they did in Chile and Central America, and they threw the government out and they ran the country for 7 years. It was very ugly. A lot of torture, a lot of right-wing excesses. And Lyndon Johnson was president at the time, and Lyndon Johnson could care less. He didn't care one way or the other what was going on in Greece. But they remembered because they were actually put in prison and then exiled to another country. They call it the diaspora. They said, we experienced the diaspora until we came back. And they said, we've never forgotten what the CIA in America did to us. Even though, by the way, these folks are half American. Their mother is American. Her name is Margaret. And so, I mean, they're all in their 50s and 60s, but they're Greek Americans. And yet, hard feelings. And so now when I tell my wife, gee, I'd like to go back there and visit. I live in Portugal. We're not that far. She's worried that somehow this may end up becoming a problem for me in some way. We don't know. We don't know. I even contacted the U.S. Embassy in Athens, and I sent them my story, and I said, do you see this as a problem if I come to visit? And they never answered.
Hmm. Hmm. So
So,
interesting. So let's take you out of your childhood now, because I don't know how many of us can share that similar kind of stories. It just blows me away. But I mentioned in the introduction, you just talked about it. You were a cop for 25 years. And Jeff, I must admit, you don't seem very cop-like.
um, people say that, and yeah, I started at 21. I was a baby. And, you know, I worked patrol. I worked in a tactical operations unit, which is plain clothes. I was investigator, and then later I got my stripes and I was a supervisor. I was actually supervising squads of officers. Um, I believe in using humor a lot, as you can tell. I believe in trying to see the best in people. But I will tell you this, Chuck, it was very, very soon after I hit the streets when reality hit. And as much as I can josh and be lighthearted, I can also be harsh. And, and I've had to take people down in the worst ways. As a matter of fact, let me back up a minute. Can you see this? I
No,
don't know, I don't know how well you can see it.
yeah, hold it down a little bit. Just hold it up, but tilt it down. That's it. Wow. Okay. That's you?
Yes, sir.
Huh. I can't read it, but I just see your photo.
Okay, this ID card is the U.S. Department of Justice, United States Marshal Service. I was a deputized U.S. Marshal, federal marshal. Here's the badge right here below it.
Wow. Wow. But
Okay.
your experience, Jeff, as a police officer, first of all, we're about the same size. And in my mind, I'm 6'5", but you turn those numbers around, it's a lot more accurate at 5'6". And you're about the same size. How did you beat the height requirement?
Well, that's a funny story. Back in those days, a lot of places had height requirements, and it's totally ridiculous, but it was just the culture of the times. I was living in Northern California and taking police science classes at a community college, riding with cops, very interested in getting into it. But in California in those days, they had height requirements. And I tried for about a year and a half, up and down the state, from San Diego up to Lake Tahoe and back. Couldn't get on. I could pass everything. And at the very end, I was an inch too short or 3 inches too short, whatever their height requirement was. And then I started looking at other states. And I looked at New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, found out that Arizona didn't have any. So I applied, went through that process, which was ridiculous because I and hitchhike across the desert from San Diego to Tucson, hitchhiking, to stay at a YMCA, to test, and then be told, okay, you've passed the first two parts. Now go back home, we'll let you know in a few weeks. I think I did that 3 or 4 times, and it was very expensive and time consuming when you're a part-time student, part-time construction worker, trying to get on planes and fly and cross states to do that. But I did, and I made it. Later on in San Francisco, the Asian community and women sued in federal court and said this has no bearing on the needs, the realities of the job, and federal judges agreed with them, and they finally overturned all those height requirements. By the way, my wife is about 2 inches shorter than me. She's about 5'2", 5'3", and she was a deputy sheriff. She's retired now, and she also started in the 70s. So you do the best you can, and you know what? The reality is this is really what you're working with. Yes, there's physical. Yes, and I've been injured. I've been stabbed. I've had broken bones. I've had car wrecks. I've had people put a gun in my back and pull the trigger, but they didn't shoot me. You deal with that, but the reality is it's your head, it's your training, and it's your wits, and it's your professionalism that really gets you through it to retire. Very few retire.
As a retired cop, since you're one of the lucky ones, how do you view policing today in America?
I'm disheartened. I'm disheartened. I stay in touch with a lot of old timers. We actually have a forum or two that people get on who've known each other for decades, and we talk about things. It's changed to the degree my wife and I just don't recognize what's going on. The the attitudes blow our minds. Now, the technology is so different. We didn't have tasers. We didn't have video cameras. We didn't have DNA testing for detectives and crime scenes, on and on and on. We had none of that. I mean, a 6-shot pistol, a nightstick, and some extra bullets. Oh, and the handcuffs. That's a good thing. And that's about it. And so when we see the changes, we're really quite disheartened with what we've seen. A lot of that is problems in society. A lot of that is we're just not sure. The training, I see great problems in the training and the attitudes. And yet, don't get me wrong, I mean, we spent between us 43 years in the business, and we loved it. And it makes us who we are. We identify with it. But there's a lot of good people out there, but there's some things going on and terrible things. A lot of it isn't just individuals. There's some institutional issues that just throw us for a spin. So I don't know. I'm not too happy with what I see. I've been pulled over twice when I was an undercover, actually. Once by the Cochise County sheriffs down on the Mexican border working a case, and once by U.S. Border Patrol. You know what? There was a third. There was a third one by the Highway Patrol. And I'll tell you what, this is 30 years ago. I was scared. I was scared. And I'm on duty, although I have long hair and I'm driving a beat up car or a truck and I'm undercover and I'm getting pulled over. But, you know, when they point a rifle through the window and they haven't even said hi yet, you know, and it's scary. It's scary. But anyway.
I remember, Jeff, reading something you had posted, and it was an article from, or it was a story from the chief of police of Detroit, who is a black man. And I think he's retired now, but in that he was relating a time where his partner in a squad car pulled out a gun, used an incredibly evil word to this man, and said he could pull the trigger. And this man turns out eventually to become the police chief of Detroit, and he had to live through that. And I got to tell you, I read that and I started to think, now I know why Jeff moved to Portugal.
I read an interesting article just 2 days ago. A woman who is a retired captain in Montgomery County, Maryland. Montgomery County is a very wealthy suburb of DC. Okay, Montgomery County. She's a retired captain. That's about 5 steps up the hierarchy. She's black female. She's now a college professor. And she said that she had to give her son, quote, the talk the other day, which is how to react as a black kid when the cops stop you. This is mom, who is retired upper level police officer for 30 years, and yet she is afraid of her son coming to some kind of violence with the people she may work with. I read that and I just, it shouldn't even be happening. It shouldn't even be happening, but it is. And she said, I have to be realistic. And of course, her son asked her, well, then you work with them. Why is this happening? And she just, we have to stop it. Ongoing. We'll take this too, Chuck, and then I'll try to get off my bandwagon. I really believe a lot of the problem is the cops are constantly being told, you're in fear of your life. You're in fear of your life. You're in fear of your life. Your training is somebody's going to take you out at any moment. And you learn that. When I stop a car in traffic at a light, I never line up next to a car. Always back a little bit so that I can see the people in that car and I'm not lined up with them. Always leave space. If you need to accelerate the car and get around, you're not up on somebody's bumper when you're stopped. Little things like that. Because the fear is amongst going to get taken out. And I attribute a lot of that to, I don't care what people say, the prevalence of weapons in the US. The violence is so high. You have more guns in America than you have human beings. I don't know if you've heard that statistic. They say we're about 330 million Americans. Right now, there's over 400 million weapons in private hands. Chuck, I'm not talking police. I'm not talking military. I'm talking private hands. So there's so much of that out there, and states are throwing out things like handgun permits. Tennessee just did, I think a week ago. No permit, no background, no this, no that, no fingerprints. Just go get you a gun, put it in your legal. That leads to the perception of violence, the opportunity for violence. I'm reading about massacres every week in the US. Why? And so I think as a result, the cops are saying, we've got to be defensive. So we have to take control. You got to be on top of it so that you don't get taken down. And I think that's causing a lot of it too.
Let me see if we can switch your soapbox from the soapbox
Okay.
of the social justice you're talking about, which is important to discuss. But your other soapbox is a storyteller. So let's go there. And let me just ask you, what kind of stories do you tell? And if you can, give us an example.
Personal stories,
Okay.
stories of culture, stories of absurd things I have seen, and then, of course, a lot of exaggerated tall tales, liars' contests, and so on. There are stories I tell that are completely true, but they're so bizarre that they sound made up, and they're not. They're not at all. And I've had people come up and ask me, "You made that up?" And my wife, who's standing right there, says, "No, we actually were there, or we were part of it," and she can confirm that. But those are the kind I like to tell. Again, personal, liars contest, cultural. I do a lot of cultural. I used to watch Carmen Didi, if you know Carmen, okay? She comes from Cuba, but she lives in Decatur, Georgia. And Carmen will do these stories where she goes in and out of the two cultures in a sentence. She'll say something like, she's talking to her mother and she'll say, "Ay, mijita, ¿cómo estás haciendo? Hey, my daughter, what is it you're doing?" And then she goes, "I live in Decatur, darling." Yeah. Decatur. And you hear Carmen do that, and she's in the two cultures, and I admire that. So I try to do that when I can, but I'm not nearly as good as she is at that. So I keep it to these other things. Personal stories, plenty of them. I have so many favorites, Chuck, it's hard to tell you, but one of my favorites is making shark's milk cheese with my cousin Clomo. And I don't know if I got to tell you, but cousin Clomo is a hippie member of my family in California, and his parents named their children after the periodic table of elements. You know, that little card with the 118, boron, nickel, iron, and all that. I never did well in that at school. I just couldn't understand that stuff. Ions and cations and negative charges. Get away from me, But his parents named him, and his name, Cousin Clomo, is Cuzn, which is actually copper zinc. And Clomo is Cl, then capital O, capital Mo, which is chlorine, oxygen, molybdenum. So legally, his name is copper, zinc, chlorine, oxygen, molybdenum, but he goes by Cousin Clomo. It just fits better. And the whole family is named in that way, and it's quite interesting. But they were old-time hippies, and they started up some of these food conspiracy stores in California in the 60s, up in the hills of Northern California, Mendocino and Redwood Country and all that. And eventually they sold out to a Chinese conglomerate, made millions, and moved their operations up to Oregon. And he was kind of and we were sitting around having a beer, and he says, "Jeffrey," he said, "how would you like to make some money?" I said, "Well, I'm okay. I'm set. I'm good. But I said, I never turned down the thought, and he said, "Well," he said, I'm on to a new enterprise." He's always in an enterprise, and he does well. Most people don't do well, right? They start 10 of them and they fail 11, right? And he says, "Have you ever had goat milk cheese?" "Oh yeah, I've eaten goat cheese a lot, especially here in Portugal. It's called cabra. It's very common." And he said, "Yeah, it's getting old." He said, "People don't want it anymore. It's passé." He said, "Now they want shark's milk cheese." "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Oh yeah." He says, "We go out and we milk sharks." He said, "We go out in the ocean," and we said, "We milk wild sharks in the ocean." He said, "Because people don't want pen-raised shark milk. They want range-free." And you have to say it's range-free. And he says, "We go out and we milk all kinds of sharks." And he said, I don't know if you're aware, but he said 90% of the humans that have been killed by sharks, and this is recorded, are male. And he said there's a correlation here. Apparently the same thing with motorcycle accidents and bungee cord jumping. 90% seem to be male. That being the case, he hires an all-woman crew because he knows there's only at best, a 10% chance that any of his employees will ever get bitten, because the sharks also read the statistics just like we do. They understand. So he makes two cheeses. Well, he makes several, but his two best are one called Hammerhead Havarti, a nice, creamy, soft, tasty Havarti. And the other, if you like white wine and you like something with a little bit of an edge to it, it's called the Great White Gouda. Now, he did say that when you go out and do this, you have to be licensed. And two things you've got to be able to do. One is you have to be able to prove you can tell the difference between different varieties of sharks, hammerhead, mako, bull, tiger, etc. Because when you sell that cheese, truth in advertising, you have to sell the correct cheese and call it what it is. And that's understood. Okay, he said the other is you have to take gender identification course. And what that means, you have to be able to tell the difference between a male and a female shark. He said, so that you don't accidentally milk a male, because you will agitate him. Guaranteed. So anyway, he does that, and he makes good money, and he's had some accidents, but he's made it through there. Now, this story that I'm telling, I have told many, many times, and I've had people with all kinds of reactions. But the story actually started innocently enough. This is maybe how my stories start. I was selling peppers at the farmer's market in Jonesborough. My wife and I were pepper farmers for a few years. And the mayor at that time, Jonesborough, a guy named Kelly Wolf, great guy, very extroverted, very out there, real nice guy, was coming by the market with his wife, and he was looking over our produce, and he said, yeah, I'm going to go up the hill here and get me some goat milk cheese from who was a Virginia cheesemaker, top of the street there by the courthouse in Jonesborough. And I said, well, did you know that he's making a new cheese from shark's milk? And I started to create this. And he had never heard such a thing. Why? Why wouldn't he? So he ambled his way up the street, visiting people, doing the politician thing. And when he got to the top, apparently he asked Big John for some samples of his shark's milk cheese. And I was very clear about the Hammerhead Havarti and the Great White Gouda. See, I had already talked to Big John, and he was kind of lamenting that he's getting a lot of competition with the goat cheese. And that's when I said, well, make something out of shark or gator or something, you know? And that was all it was. But when the mayor was there, I couldn't resist it. So I slipped him some thoughts there, well, he got a little upset, and he came running down the street looking for me, and he was bellowing quite a bit. I actually had to crawl under a truck in the parking lot and just hide under, watch his feet go by. And I stayed there for about 10 minutes till my wife said it was all clear. Now, again, the story goes on, and I have plenty more parts of it. But you have to understand, we were at a Whole Foods in Johnson City by ETSU one day, my wife and I. And we're at the deli with the meats and cheeses, and they had a Havarti cheese. They had some samples. And I asked the clerk there, the young lady, I said, wow, I said, I like Havarti. I said, do you have any of that Hammerhead Havarti? And I laid it out that way. Oh, it comes from here and it doesn't. She looked completely confused. She went and got the manager. And the manager came out and did his best to work for 16 years. I have never heard of shark's milk cheese. I said, oh, it's quite the thing, man. I said, my cousin Clomo goes out and harvests it. And he said to me, well, he said, this sounds like something he says, so let me check with my managers in California or Oregon, and if they have some, would you like a pound or two? I'll have it shipped over. He was doing his customer service to the nth degree. The problem is it went too far, as you can see. My wife had long disappeared. Soon as she heard the beginning of this, she's around the back of the store, and I had to tell him, let me check with the wife and I'll be back. And that was my out. So I have tried this in different ways, and it's worked out. It's been fun. I do get people coming up to me saying, well, you know, that can't be true because sharks are mammals. And I said, well, tell that to my cousin who's missing a piece of his butt when he was milking one and it bit him. He knows better. And so anyway, off it goes. One of the things that I've learned with telling tall tales, always start with some truth. Always start with a fact. Pull people in. They'll listen to you. They know you're at a tall tales or a liar's contest. They know you're going to lie to them. Why do we watch Bill Lepp? Okay, sure. But you start with a little truth and you work it. And then you start to veer a little bit and you watch people's reactions. And they're nodding their head and they're elbowing their neighbor. They're whispering to somebody. and you go, okay, and then you set that hook and you start to bring them in and you work it back and forth. The other thing, and I will tell you this, is research is critical. I do a tremendous amount of factual research so I can intersperse my stories with facts, with true facts. And when I see people's faces, they're starting to doubt me, I throw a couple of truisms out, a couple of true facts that I know they are going to agree with. And that usually brings them back. Oh, well, in that case, all right. Yeah, shame on me, silly me for doubting him. And they start to go along with you again. I guess it's almost psychotic. I'm not sure how to call it, but it's working them. It's working them. Okay. And I have watched Bill Epp sitting in the back of a green room or a hallway with his notes and his research and working it and working it. When he comes out and sticks those thumbs in that back pocket and pulls that cap down, Bill Epp is coming at you not from, well, I got a funny story over here on the hay bale. Bill has done his work, but he is so polished that he gives you the impression he made it up on the sidewalk outside the door. No, Bill has worked it. And I appreciate that because it's part of the art that people don't see, they don't expect.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned uh, the Liars Contest and also Tall Tales. What's the difference between a tall tale and a Storyteller's Liars Contest?
I am so glad you asked that because I have here about an 8-page outline of a class I taught. Can you read the top at all? I don't know how to hold that.
Hold it up a little higher. Little higher. Higher. There you go. Lies, exaggerations, and tall tales. Gotcha.
I actually teach a class in that. I taught a class in that. And it's about a 4-hour class. Lies are deceit. And let's be honest, when at these contests, you're not out to deceive, you're not out to hurt, but they have become, it's a misnomer. They become called liars contests, whether it's Mark Twain or Will Rogers or other people. It's a misnomer. It's really tall tales. It's exaggerating. A lie to me is deceitful and hurtful. Now, a lot of the tall tales are handed down. They're cultural. You can look at all kinds of cultures, Paul Bunyan and Pecos Bill and other countries, Santa Claus, okay? These are tall tales and they're done for a purpose, usually a moral or handing down a custom, okay? But the liars contests just tend to be, how much can I exaggerate and keep you going? And that's really what they are. There are different ones all over the country. And by the way, this one that I was in was sponsored or hosted by Johnny Fowler.
Yes, he's been a guest on the show. Yes.
Yeah, over in at Haygood Mills, and he was the MC and the sponsor or the host. I'm sorry, but that's the first time I met him, and I won that one, and I couldn't believe it. Here's the tough part: I had to call my wife on the way home. Know where this is going, right? I'm the champion, and I won first place. And she's going, no. I know you better. We've been together 30 years, you know. And I actually handed the phone to a friend of mine from church who was with me for the experience. He had to convince her that, no, your husband is telling the truth. He actually won a liar's contest. Figure that one out, okay?
Well, Jeff, I'm almost afraid to ask this next question, but you hold a Guinness Book of World Records record. And tell us about that record. It must have something to do with storytelling.
Well, I'm quite proud of it. I hold no records. I held no records until August of 2009. And what happened is we had moved to Tennessee, Jonesborough. I have a brother who's an accountant up in New York. And even though he's an accountant and sits at a computer and does all these mind-boggling numbers and audits that he talks about, I cannot understand how a person can spend decades doing that. Nor could he understand how I was a cop and dealt with people and misbehavior and enjoyed it. But he heard we were living near Bristol Motor Speedway. And he flew down, bought 2 tickets, and picked me up and spent a few days. And we went to my very first NASCAR race in Bristol. Now, the Bristol track is a half-mile only. It's very tight. And the stadium seats about 162,000. That's about 2 regular football stadiums, more or less. and it's cone shaped and it goes up like this, incredibly loud because it's so tight. And you have to wear some kind of ear muffs, and there's all kinds of issues with that. They came out and announced that they had a representative from the Guinness Book of World Records on the premises. He went out and spoke, very British. I say it's a bloody good show we have here, you know. And he says, but I do think your cars are going the wrong direction, you know. And he had to sing a song that was up on the Jumbotron. And I don't remember what it was, some country song. And then he certified that he was present and certified the largest ever world record karaoke ever held. And we were all proud co-owners of the record. So when people ask me, well, what kind of things have you done in your life? I said, well, I share a world record with 162,000 other people. Is that okay? But we had a good time there. I haven't been back to one. Honestly, it just didn't do much for me. But I will tell you.
Involved.
Yeah. You have to watch people for about 3 or 4 hours beforehand. And you know, what I noticed is when the cars are racing, everybody's socializing. Hi, how you doing? Where are you from? Oh, Indiana. Well, what brings you over here? And you chat with the people around you. And then when the cars crash, everybody runs back and watches. And when they clear up the debris, they go back. Well, is that right? You know, and it's like a social scene with an occasional car crash. That, I think that's what NASCAR is.
If I may, I have one of my dearest cousins is Arnold. He's 85 years old. He lives in Louisville, Kentucky, which already makes him a class gentleman. He loves country music. He loves NASCAR, and he's Jewish, which you don't usually have that combination. But on his 65th birthday, his wife got him a ride at the Kentucky Motor Speedway in a NASCAR car. And it was the thrill of his life. So at least some of people in the family, I guess, are into NASCAR, but certainly not me. I need to ask you another question about your stories. How do you prepare for your stories? How do you create a story? I think people in the audience need to understand that.
Some of it comes from, my wife believes, a loose speck in the mind that travels through the blood somehow and lodges and creates a blockage. And that's possible. That's possible. I've always told stories. I've always enjoyed telling stories. Being a cop for all those years, believe me, all I heard was lies and exaggerations and all kinds of issues. And from some of the best, especially when your life is on the line or you're heading to prison for life. And I'm an investigator investigating a child abuse case, and the person is feeding me all kinds of things. Well done. And learn after a while how to start spotting it and what you're looking for. So anyway, I've had plenty of experience being on the receiving end. I also just look for abnormalities or absurdities in life. I see certain things and I go, that is crazy. That is bizarre. Why would you do that? And then part of me goes, well, you know, if you fleshed that out a little bit and added this and put a character, well, my God, you might have a great story. And walk in the door with their, well, I used to call them carts, but they're called buggies. The shopping buggy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, the shopping buggy in the cart. By the way, here, my British and Australian neighbors call them, because we have those next door, they call them trolleys. Oh, go to the store and get you a trolley. What? It's different. But actually what I would do at some point, I'd write it all out, do some research if I had to, and then I would go out to my compost pile. I lived on acreage in Jonesborough, and my brother and I owned the hayfield next door. We had this monster compost pile, and I would go out there, set a clock because everything was timed, get my notes and work on it and do my gesticulating and my drama and this and that. My voice changes and whispering and yelling. Why subject my wife to that in the house? I mean, she can only take so much of it. And so it was safe for me. It was safe. Actually, it was safe for society. Okay. People didn't have to deal with it. And I could be out there for 2 hours at my compost pile, waving my arms. Oh, that didn't go over well. Change that one, add this word, reverse that, try this again, try it out. Oh, I'm way over. Oh, I got to cut 30 seconds. How am I going to do that? By the way, Chuck, my problem has never been fleshing out a story. I know some storytellers, mine is shrinking it down to the time limits.
Oh, we are brothers, believe me.
I can't tell you how many times somebody would say, well, I want you for a story. Normally we do 15 to 20 minutes. Could you do 45? And my answer is only?
Yes.
Yes. I've done as long as an hour and I've never felt it. I never felt tired. I don't work from notes. I mean, oh yeah, I practice with notes, but when I'm telling, I'm not telling with notes. And I also leave myself a certain amount of leeway where I can add a little, I can subtract a little, I can plump this up if I need to, and I watch my audience. I must tell you a funny experience I had. I get a lot of audience experiences, but I came off the stage in Jonesborough one time, and I was telling a story about getting tattooed in the Navy to avoid giving blood, which is true. I have a number of tattoos here.
Mm-hmm. I see them. Yeah.
And 2 years I was working for the Navy. I was a civilian working in DC in 71, 73. We were ordered to give blood. I don't like long needles. I just don't like needles. And I just had my vaccine last week and I cringed, but I realized it was for a good cause, me. And they ordered us to give blood. And we found out that if you were tattooed in the last 6 months, they can't take your blood for the fear of infection, even that many decades ago. So we raced down into the worst parts of Washington, D.C., 5 or 6 of us, young 18, 19-year-olds, and we all got a little tattoo. Came to work and showed it to them and said, look, I can't give blood. Well, you'll be back in 6 months and a day, and we're going to make you give blood. It was called voluntary. It was called voluntary blood drive, but we will have 100% compliance. That's military. So for 2 years, every 6 months, boom, another one, another one, another one, another one. And over a period of time, I didn't have to give blood. So I tell this story and I show the tattoos. And I'm coming off a stage and this little lady stops me right on the aisle as you're coming up the theater at the storytelling center, the epicenter. Even though that's small, that is the epicenter of storytelling,
Yes.
probably in the world, not just America.
If I may just quickly interject, we're talking about the National Storytelling Festival at the International Storytelling Center in Jonesborough, Tennessee, and it is the Hollywood of storytelling. So go ahead. I just want to interject that for the audience.
And I think the seating is only about 95 or 100. It's a small venue. It's not a theater. I mean, it's not a stadium. And she calls me over, this little lady, and she says, I got a bone to pick with you. Well, that's a phrase that my mother used. You don't hear people saying that anymore. I have a bone to pick with you. Mm-hmm. And she proceeded to rant at me that I was the most selfish person she ever saw or heard of, because part of my story was that I had gotten this tattoo as a result of retiring from police work. They gave me an option. You want a medical plan for life and a pension, or would you like a tattoo? Option A, option B. And I went home for 2 weeks and my wife and I researched, we did our due diligence, we talked to family, we prayed for 2 days, we fasted, we did, and I came back, I said, the tattoo, and I said, honestly, a tattoo, okay, you can tax my pension, but you can't tax my tattoo. And you can reduce or take away my pension, but the tattoo is permanent. So it makes sense. And that's part of my little story. Well, she's looking at it and she's calling me a selfish such and such and on. How dare you put yourself ahead of your family? Your family needs medical. And what kind of monster are you? She went crazy. And her husband's behind her trying to calm things down. And I took it. It's okay. And then she, at one point, turns to her husband and she insulted me. She insulted me by turning to him as though I'm not there. And she said, I'm so glad he doesn't live in our neighborhood. That's insulting, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that.
What do I say? What do I do? I answered her and I said, you know that house that's for sale down the street? Now, I don't even know what city she comes from. I don't even know what county she lives in. But every neighborhood has a house for sale somewhere. Okay? And she said, what about it? And I said, we signed the papers on Thursday.
By the way, I think your tattoos are around here in Asheville where everyone has tattoos. We call that a sleeve.
Well, if it's all the way down, yes, it's a sleeve. Yeah. But, that's how I used to deal with problems in police work as well. You deflect a little bit, you use a little bit of humor, you do something unexpected, and you get people to kind of go, what? And you have the advantage. And it's just part of the way it works. But I went home, told my wife that experience that night, and her reaction was, well, then don't tell those stories. Don't agitate people.
Which is for us motivation to keep on telling those same stories and pump it up a little bit next time. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Jeff, we have about 5 minutes left, and I just want to ask you a couple more questions. One of them is, we all do this. As a storyteller, we all kind of make mistakes or a blunder. What are your most famous blunders that you've had on stage as a storyteller?
Whew. I've had several, but one was introducing Donald Davis in Jonesborough.
And for the folks who may not know Donald Davis, the two in the world that don't, could you tell us who Donald Davis is?
Donald Davis he's the man when it comes to storytelling. He's from North Carolina, former mentor. He's been telling decades. When Donald Davis shows up, the place is a sellout. And he's very homespun. He has a way of dressing with the little bow tie and the shoes. And he is the man. He is the weaver. He is the standard for most storytelling. He doesn't do a lot of tall tales, although he will put some twists in his life. And he's very just down home, homespun. But he's the man. And it was a sellout crowd. And they said, oh, you're the president of the guild, Jeff. Would you like to introduce him, do a little MC, master of ceremony? Sure. And part of that is always tell people, turn off the phones, don't talk to your neighbors, don't take a bathroom break until we have the intermission, and all the little rules of storytelling for the benefit of the teller and the audience. So I went to Donald early and I said, do you have any likes or dislikes? And he said, yeah. He said, don't spend a lot of time with the intro. He says, the last guy did the other day and he ate into my time and it really upset me. Okay, not a problem, sir. I got you. So I decided I was going to have one of the ladies from the town in Jonesborough call me on my phone as I was telling the audience, I don't want you using your phones. We don't want to hear ringing. She would call me. I would make some comment about, I can't talk to you right now. I'm listening to Donald Davis, making my point with a little shtick, a little scenario, a little, okay. Well, she's in the back and she's waving her arm and I'm waiting for the phone to ring and she keeps waving and I'm going, what's going on here? And I keep going, waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, Donald Davis says, kind of in a stage whisper, would you get off of my stage? You're eating into my time. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want that to happen after what had happened the day before. And I went, oh my God. So I apologized, wound it up, got off the stage. And I went to her and I said, you were supposed to call me. I gave you my number. And she said, I did. You won't answer. And I looked down and, oh, damn, I had turned the phone off.
Oh, Jeff.
It was like, oh, in front of all these people and Donald Davis, I blew it big time. No muss, no fuss. Another time, very quickly, I was telling a story and I didn't have any prep. I was actually told to get on stage and fill in for somebody. And I didn't know what to tell. And I told a funny story about my wife being a deputy sheriff, and totally true. And in effect, I didn't replace a light bulb outside the front door. And when she came home at night, she had to take her shotgun with a tactical light and aim it at the door and light the door so she could see to put the key in. And the neighbors saw this early in the morning when she would come home 2, 3 in the morning, and they thought we were having marital difficulties. And they came to me worried that my wife is going to kill me. And so I thought, what are you talking about? So I asked her and she said, well, you haven't changed the light bulb. That's how I have to get in the house, with this Remington 12 gauge 870 flashlight.
We got about 30 seconds, Jeff.
Okay. So I tell the story, and on my way home, I call her and she says, well, how did it go? And I said, oh yeah. Did you tell a story? Yeah. What about? And I said, oh, no big deal. And I was trying to. And she said, it doesn't matter. She said, 2 of my friends were in the audience. They were texting me the whole time.
Well, Jeff, I have to tell you, my man, this has been so much fun. And folks, by the way, Jeff and I have a few things in common. We both have Ukrainian roots. My paternal grandparents are from Ukraine. We're both short. We're both storytellers. But Jeff, I am just so happy to share you with the world now that we go out online. And I can't wait to see you again. And I just want to thank you so much. Go ahead. You were about to say
One
something.
more thing we can have in common, Chuck.
What's that?
You come visit us in Portugal.
Oh, you got that. And folks, to wrap it up, I need to let you all know that you've been listening to WPVM FM in Asheville, North Carolina, 1037, and globally at WPVMFM.org. Bye, everybody. Bye, Jeff. Take care.
Buddy, take care.